We've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains on this lovely Friday. Before we can go ahead and get started, we've got a new political Inquisition indictment we've got to get to, but let's make sure things are working, shall we, before we dive right into it. And it looks like they're alive and well, so let's get started, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group. We're a criminal defense law firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're talking about a criminal case, an indictment. Peter Navarro, former Trump aide, got indicted. And this is not the first one of these for contempt of Congress emanating from the fake January 6th Select Committee. We're going to go through this in depth today. We're going to take a look at the statement from the DOJ, the Justice Department. This is coming out of Washington, D.C. Circuit Court, which we just were living in the Sussman trial. Of course, we knew that Sussman found not guilty there. He was a favored political party operative. This guy, Peter Navarro, is not. Same jurisdiction, different rules because he's on the other side of the coin here. But we'll take a look at what the DOJ is doing with this. We're also going to go through the indictment with some fine-tooth combs here and take a look at some of the reaction, because Peter Navarro was actually out there in front of the courthouse talking at some length about his reaction to all of this. And it wasn't just your standard sort of arrest and first appearance in court. Peter Navarro, those of you who know who he is, sort of talks a lot. He's got a lot of things to say. Not usually the best thing to be doing if you are a criminal defendant in a criminal case, but he went off apparently on a tirade in front of the judge. And we have some live reaction or some live tweeting that took place from our good friend at Inner City Press over on Twitter. And we spent a lot of time with him when we were covering the Ghislaine Maxwell case, because he's there and he sort of tweets in real time. Oftentimes, I think this was on a phone proceeding today, but regardless, does a great job live tweeting. And so we'll take a look at what Inner City Press had to say, covering the actual initial appearance for Peter Navarro himself. We've got reaction from Matt Gaetz, and we're going to do a quick refresher. It's been some time since we've familiarized ourselves with exactly why and exactly how fake the January 6th Select Committee is. But we got to do a recap on this because we're getting close to some pretty consequential cases. Not only has Peter Navarro been charged, indicted, arrested now, and sort of seen a judge already, but we know that, what's his name? Well, there's several others, but the big one that we're waiting for in July is Stephen Bannon. And so we've got Navarro now. Mark Meadows, I think, just got indicted. All sorts of problems here. And this is going to be a continued downward spiral, I think, for this country as these political prosecutions continue to gain steam. And many people on the left today are doing cartwheels. They're very excited about this. They say, finally, these insurrectionists who almost took over America are now finally getting what's due. But when we take a look at this, I think we're going to really see here exactly why this fake January 6th Select Committee is so problematic, because it's illegally constituted and it is not legitimate just on the basis of it. You just take a look at it facially. It doesn't even seem fair. So we'll go through that in depth, but we've got a lot to get to. Want to say shout out to those of you in the chat over on YouTube. We've got Hope and Pieces in the house. Maddie Adams, Jessica Butterfield says Jack Poso posted something on Twitter. I think I have a quote from Posobiec here on Twitter. Cool guys in the house. Vienticus Prime is chatting away and he's there. He's saying, I'm all alone in life. Vienticus, you're not alone. You're here with us. We're here together. Cheers, my friend. You're in good company. But they're chatting away over on YouTube. They're also chatting away over on Locals. I see Vienticus. He's over there, carrots sprouted, and he's got his potato sack there, which is just outstanding. It's growing like crazy, taking place over on our Locals community. But thank you, everybody, for your support there and for supporting our law firm with your referrals and for trusting our team and helping good people charged with crimes. All of our links are down in the description below. And your referrals and your trust in our team helps us be able to spend more time together here. So I thank you for that. But without any further ado now, let's take a look at the latest in the Democrats' political inquisition of their political opponents. And I use that language because it is really, in my opinion, that problematic. We're talking about, as we're going to see throughout this program, an illegally constituted fake January 6th Select Committee whose basically sole purpose as it exists is to go and prosecute political enemies. And so we've taken a look at other countries, or really kind of dictatorships around the world, that have done that type of thing. Think in places like China, right, where you have a one-party system where anybody who sort of pops up, the main ruling party will go after that oppositional force and use every level of power to take them out. Okay, we talk about currently old Pooty Poo, Putin over there in Russia. He prosecutes his political enemies, Navalny, right, being housed in some Siberian prison for several years, probably going to be a life sentence for him. And we're not there yet, but we're starting down that path, because what we see is we have a fake constituted select committee that is referring criminal indictments over to a DOJ, a Department of Justice, also compromised by the Democrats, run by Biden, allegedly, and Merrick Garland. And we see that in DC, they will let their own side go walk free. Michael Sussman can just walk right out of the courtroom. But anybody else who's a January 6th defendant or who's on the Trump team is now going to be indicted and arrested and prosecuted in the court of law. So we have these two tiers that is now sort of emanating. It's going to be very problematic, extremely problematic, because once the justice system stops functioning, once that becomes compromised, now we're battling over the justice system. And if it becomes so illegitimate that nobody believes in it, well, basically the rest of society starts bifurcating, and people will start to just not go to court. And they'll just say, you can't enforce anything, because they really have no legitimacy, which is what all of this is predicated upon. Society doesn't work if the institutions are not legitimate. And as we are seeing, the institutions themselves are causing their own downfall by eviscerating their own legitimacy by prosecuting these types of ridiculous crimes. So let's take a look and start at the top. We have here, we can see, nope, that's not what we wanted. What happened? No, that's the wrong screen. All right, hang on. So this did not work out. That's my other browser. It's my other window. So I have to change this here. We're going to have to do this on the fly. Let's see. So if I open this one, what I need to do is change the display. 1 second. So for those of you who want to know how Open Broadcast Studio works, this is how it works. So what we're going to do is just change this source over to another display here. Let's call this display 2. No. There it is. Okay. So I think that is functional now. Let's see here. Sort of what I wanted. Apologies. This should have, I don't know what, I had to restart my computer. And so everything got out of sync. There we go. Now that's what we're talking about. Back to the indictment. Fixing things on the fly. All right. So here, posted on the DOJ website, what we see is their press release. The comments says, Rob, I saw your browser tab over there. Busted. There's nothing there. Go rewind. Here you can see, though, let's go back to the indictment. This was posted on the DOJ website. Peter Navarro indicted for contempt of Congress. 2 charges filed for defaulting on the House subpoena from the Select Committee investigating the Capitol breach. And so they posted this, of course, June 3rd. We're going to go through this. Some of this is, kind of repetitive and dry, but it is worth diving into because these are all going to go to trial. And I forgot to mention this, but we're talking about a very compressed timeline. Part of the reason the Democrats are so stressed out about this, we're going to detail more of this later, but 2 of the Republicans who were on this fake select committee, Liz Cheney and crying Adam Kinzinger, they're not going to be around that much longer. Next year, like fast forward 1 year from now, they're not on the bench anymore. They're both going to lose their elections. And they're not, actually, I think Kinzinger's district is being evaporated. So don't even have to worry about him. Liz Cheney's down like 60 points in her primary there in Wyoming. Nobody likes her. They're tired of her. So they're in deep trouble. This committee is going to become even less legitimate as this goes on. And so they've got this really, really compressed time period in which they need to start getting action on this. They're also about to get blown out in the next election. And so what are they doing? They're turning around to the Department of Justice, part of the executive branch, to go and prosecute their political enemies, to score points with their political base. It's insane. If we were watching another country do this, if we looked anywhere else and said, wow, can you believe that? One party is literally charging the other party with crimes. We'd say that's barbaric. I mean, we're a Western democracy here. How could they be doing that? This is offensive to my notions as a modern day sophisticated individual. It's ridiculous, but we're doing it right here in this country. And we're going to fast forward 30 years and we're going to look back and we're going to say, I can't believe this country went through something like this. If there is a country, and we're just going to sort of recall what it used to be like to have due process and to sort of exist without parties prosecuting each other. And it's sort of like we look back on the McCarthy era and we say, how did that exist? Well, back then, there were a bunch of people who were cheering that on, who were saying, yeah, go root out those communists. Yeah, they don't need privacy. Yeah, they don't need any protections. Damned be their constitutional rights. Nobody cares. But here we have an entire political party and a huge part of the mainstream establishment media who is going bananas over this every single time one of these things happen. They're doing cartwheels because it's their political party that's gaining a victory. All right. You can see it says Navarro, age 72 years old. They're going to go to the airport and arrest this guy and put him in handcuffs. He's charged with one count of contempt involving his refusal to appear for a deposition and refusal to provide documents. Despite a subpoena, we're going to talk about why it's illegal, from the House Select Committee here. The indictment was returned yesterday and unsealed today. So it was actually sealed at one point because they were presumably trying to stop him from, destroying evidence or from fleeing or something like that because he's such a dangerous individual. Navarro is to make his initial appearance this afternoon in D.C., and he did. We learn more from the press release. Case is being prosecuted by, of course, Merrick Garland and U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves out of D.C., Steve DeAntuono as well. They say, as detailed in the indictment on February 9th, the Garbage Select Committee issued a subpoena to Navarro that required him to appear on February 23rd, and then for a deposition on March 2nd. Now, I don't know if we covered Navarro's specifically, but we definitely covered many others of these, right? And I think we talked about, maybe it was Bannon's who sort of responded back, asserting executive privilege, and they said, well, we don't care, and they sent it over to the DOJ anyways, and of course, Garland charged it, because that's what he's there to do. According to the indictment, Navarro refused to appear to give testimony as required by the subpoena. Refused to produce those documents as well. In the subpoena, the Select Committee said it had reason to believe that Navarro had information related to its investigation, which is, of course, also garbage because they wanted everything from everybody. I mean, we had a graphic here on this channel of fishing Benny Thompson. I should have pulled that out of the old repertoire, but he would come up on the screen because he was fishing, because the subpoenas or the letters that they sent out of this garbage committee wanted like 30 pages of stuff. It was like, what'd you have for breakfast on March 7th, 1998? Oh, you don't want to provide that? Well, I guess you're a terrorist. Guess you're a homegrown domestic violent extremist because you won't tell us what's on your text message from your Nokia phone that you used to play Snake on. The whole thing. Ridiculous. We went through every single one of those, and they wanted Sean Hannity's text. They wanted Sebastian Gorka's text. I mean, they were going after everybody because that's what you do when you're on the opposing political party and you want to eviscerate your opponents. You investigate every single facet of this thing until you can identify them and throw them out. Navarro, formerly an advisor to President Trump on various trade and manufacturing policies, has been a private citizen since departing the White House in June 2021. Each count of contempt of Congress carries 30 days in jail, maximum $100,000 fine. Federal district judge will determine the sentence. An indictment is merely an allegation. Yeah. All defendants are presumed innocent until proven otherwise. Yeah, which is absolutely true, a sacred value that we have here. But this is really not what this is about, right? They don't care if they're innocent or guilty or not. They want to drag their names through the mud many, many months, years after the original incident, because they're trying to sideline their political opposition. And in particular, somebody named Donald Trump. Now, this useless committee is about to take the prime time show. We've got an event coming up next week on June 9th. So 1 week from yesterday, 6 days from now. On the 9th, the Garbage Committee is going to be putting this on prime time, my friends. And we're going to be live streaming this here. I hope you do join us. Mark those calendars down. Thursday, June 9th. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time. And they're going to say that additional details about additional witnesses are going to be announced next week. But they tell us that January 6th Select Committee will hold a hearing on Thursday at 8 p.m. in the Cannon House. The committee is going to present previously unseen material documenting January 6th, receive witness testimony, preview additional hearings, and provide the American people a summary of its findings. And their coordinated multi-step effort to overturn the results of the election and prevent the transfer of power. So we're planning on streaming this whole stupid thing here on that date. So it'll be 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll just put it on here. We'll make fun of these idiots as they go through their little garbage show. Now, regardless, this is serious stuff because people are being charged with crime. Steve Bannon charged with a crime. Navarro charged with a crime. Mark Meadows is on the queue. Right, they're all coming down the list. And this is what the court docket looks like from the DC Circuit Court. And so this case just hit the docket, right? As we have learned, I want to show you what we're going to look at next. Here is what the first entry looks like. It's the indictment as to Peter Navarro. And so we'll spend our time going through that in detail. But there was also this motion to seal the indictment that sort of joined with it. And it's a motion, an order granting that. So the judge granted it, all went in, hit the court docket. They left, conducted the arrest, then they unsealed it. The minute order came out. Based on the government's representation to the court that the unsealing event has occurred, okay, meaning the arrest took place, this matter is automatically unsealed. All right. Case unsealed then on 6/3. And then we've got 2 notices of appearance. And I took this screenshot about 30 minutes ago. So at the close of, I think, business today, this is what the docket looked like. But we have 2 notices of appearance that have been entered, but these are both for the United States government. So entered here, we have Elizabeth Ann Alloy and then Amanda Rose Vaughn, which kind of sounds familiar. I feel like she's appeared on a case that we've covered before, but I can't recall which. But they both entered their appearances for the United States, which means that they're the government prosecutors who are officially on the case. And so there's nothing really interesting or special about any of it, but we start to see these are the basic foundations of a case starting to form. Before we dive into the indictment, quick reminder for those who sort of have become unfamiliar with Peter Navarro. He's been around for quite a while. Here's a photograph from him in 2018. The Wikipedia page gives us some details saying that when he was a part of the Donald Trump administration, he actually was kind of the first person who created the position of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing before the position was ultimately dissolved. So the position was established, position was dissolved. They don't really care about manufacturing or trade anymore now, I guess, unless it's union labor or something like that. But they evaporated that after Trump left. And we see that he's an American economist and an author. He was an advisor to President Trump. He was the Defense Production Act policy coordinator, previously served as deputy assistant to the president, also at the White House Office for the Trade Council. We see that he was a professor emeritus at the Business of Economics and Public Policy and the Paul Mirage School of Business. Among other publications, Navarro ran unsuccessfully for office in San Diego 5 times, apparently. So ran for office, but didn't make it. But he's in California, so that's not really a downer, is it? It's kind of true. It's hard to become a Republican and win in California anywhere. So that's who we're talking about. And he sounds, if you read that, sounds to me like he is absolutely a homegrown extremist from what I can tell. And also he's 72, so he's got some pretty aggressive years ahead of him. And I feel safer, personally. I feel safer that he's arrested and he's on notice now. So let's take a look at this indictment. Here we see this was filed on June 2nd, received there. This is the indictment. We'll go through this in some detail. It's not all that much different from some of the others that we've covered, but it is, I think, important to see how this is being assembled because we're about to disassemble it because it's all illegal. Here, you can see it is the grand jury original document. We've got 2 counts. 1, contempt of Congress for the papers. 1, contempt of Congress for the testimony. So they issued 2 subpoenas. 1, drag your butt down here and sit down in front of our useless committee and answer our questions verbally in a deposition, give testimony. And number 2, give us access to all your documents so that we can scour through them and rub your nose in anything. And he said, I'm not going to do either one of those things. No testimony, no papers. So on June 3rd, they write, the select committee gives us some background here. On June 3rd, 30th, The U.S. House of Representatives adopted this article. Now, we're going to unpack this article, Resolution 503. Okay, very important article. This is the basis for all of this useless garbage. They're saying they're saying this is legal. We're allowed to go and subpoena him and order him to come into our committee and testify. How are we authorized to do that? It's just like if you break the law, right? If you get a DUI or you committed domestic violence, you say, well, where'd that law come from? Is that law legitimate? Yeah, it is. The legislature passed it. Okay, they can do that. Yeah. Well, what does the law say? It says this. Did you do that? Did you violate that law? Did you do the thing that they said you couldn't do? Well, that's what they're alleging. Okay. And all of that is legitimate because we as a people have decided that our legislatures can pass laws that govern criminal conduct in our states. So we all tie it back to the original source of power, which is oftentimes the Constitution and sort of the Declaration. But here, we don't have anything like that. So what are they relying on in terms of law in order to go do these things and make these demands of Peter Navarro? It all comes from House Resolution 503, H.R. 503. This established, according to the U.S. government, all right, these are the prosecutors who wrote this, established the Select Committee to investigate January 6th on the U.S. Capitol. All right. And we don't know anything yet about 503. We're going to learn more about it. But apparently that sounds official. All right. It's a House resolution, like a statute or something. What else do we have? They give us some details. According to House Resolution 503, the Select Committee's purpose was in part to investigate and report upon facts, circumstances, and causes relating to the J6 domestic terrorist attack upon the U.S. Capitol complex, hereinafter referred to as the domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol. These people they're just so dramatic. Okay. And relating to the interference with the peaceful transfer of power, including facts and causes related to the preparedness and response of the U.S. Capitol Police and other local agencies, as well as influencing other factors. All right. So they give us that whole statement. Now, you'll notice there that they just detailed what the purpose of this act was. Okay. So it doesn't really tell us where did you get the authority to demand a subpoena of Peter Navarro, to demand that he come in and provide testimony, to demand that he come in and speak to you idiots? Where's your power on this? Here, they're just telling us what the purpose of HR 503 was. Okay, great. Thanks for the purpose. Great. One of the Select Committee functions as set forth. Okay, so is this where their power comes from? Or let's see what happens here. Was to investigate the facts. Okay, so they're supposed to do this. Circumstances and causes related to the domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol, including circumstances relating to B, influencing factors that contributed to the domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol, and how technology, including online platforms, financing, and malign foreign influence operations and campaigns may have factored into the motivation, organization, execution of the domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol and other entities of the public-private sector as determined relevant by Select Committee for such investigation. Can you believe this? All right. That's their power under this committee. And so if you're going to formulate yourselves a committee, you might as well give yourselves basically unlimited power. Okay. They can basically do whatever they want. Contributing factors, influencing factors? I don't know. That could be anything. Like, is there any limiting principle on that? Anything could influence somebody. Somebody could have seen an advertisement when they were 7 years old that turned them into a Republican. Or maybe they watched a movie and they said, I happen to like firearms. Now you're a Second Amendment person. You're a domestic terrorist now. Can they come in and subpoena all your records? Because you may have been participating. There's no limiting principle. The tentacles go on indefinitely. And also, if they can't say that it is directly connected to the underlying event, then they just say, as determined relevant. So it's a catch-all, right? So first of all, this is not why this is illegal. This is just a stupid thing that they put in there, right? Look, if you're going to write yourself like a promotion and like your job duties and all the powers that you have, you're going to make it amazing. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Yes, I want, yeah. Unlimited refills. Yes, unlimited. That sounds like a lot. Who cares? Put it in there. Are we going to use unlimited refills? No, probably not, but put it in there. Nobody's checking. All right. And they did that. Whatever they want. Now, under paragraph 4, we see that they tell us House Resolution 503 says that the select committee is going to issue a final report, which we're all just dying for, which is going to include recommendations for corrective measures, possible changes in the law, policy procedures, rules, regulations to prevent future similar acts and to strengthen the security and the resilience of the United States and the American democratic institutions against domestic terrorism. Okay, so again, thank you. They're going to issue a report. They're going to do all these things. We know one of the functions and what that was. But one of the things that's very interesting about this is in this document, we have not seen thus far the basis of power of this committee. So I want to share with you the actual resolution as it passed. Now, there's going to be a lot of text on the screen, but there's not much that we need to really kind of, come to dissect in order to understand what's actually happening here. This is over at congress.gov. This is the official government website. You see, this is HR 503. Oh, is that what we're talking about? Yes. It's on 6/30/2021, a motion laid down. It's the committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Remember this? This is exactly what these prosecutors are referencing. But if you notice this, it tells us this establishment under Section 1, it's hereby established. It's the select committee. Same thing we're talking about. But under Section 2, it says that we've got some pretty specific rules about the composition of this committee. It tells us the appointment of members. Oh, well, how does this work? Because if these rules aren't followed, like if the composition of the committee is problematic, well, then it's not lawful, is it? It's not a legitimately constituted committee. It tells us the composition and the appointment of members. The speaker shall, not may, shall, no discretion on this, appoint 13 members to the select committee. Do you see that number right there? Right there. 13 members to the select committee. 5 of whom shall be appointed, shall, not may, shall, after consultation with the minority leader. After consultation with the minority leader, meaning that they go over to Jim Jordan or Andy McCarthy or whoever is at the time, whoever the minority leader was at the time, I think it was Jim Jordan. And he says, I want these people on the panel so that it's equitable. If you do the math on that, 13 members total, 5 of whom are Republicans, 8 of whom are Democrats. That is a legally, lawfully constituted January 6th committee, not under my rules, under the House's own rules. This is the document that they were referencing in their indictment. They designate the chair. The speaker shall designate 1 member to serve as the chair of the select committee, and any vacancy shall be filled in the same manner as the original appointment. Okay, so they're not allowed to adjust any of this stuff. But they skipped over this section in their indictment, didn't they? They didn't talk about that. They jumped right into this section to investigate and report upon the facts and circumstances. And we read all that stupid garbage that they gave themselves power to do. But the select committee does not have 13 members, 5 of whom happen to be Republicans. In fact, it doesn't have anything close to that. Here's what the actual committee looks like. The chairperson is Fishing Benny Thompson, who was sending letters out to everybody all across the country trying to demand that they deliver every single digital trace ever created over to his office. But look now, the majority members are Zoe Lofgren, Democrat, Elaine Luria, Democrat, Pencil Neck Adam Schiff, Democrat, Pete Aguilar, Stephanie Murphy, and Jamie Raskin, all Democrats. Well, look at that. That's 7 people there, isn't it? 2, 4, 6, 7. Well, that's almost 8. Almost. But it's not quite. But the Republicans now are not even close to their 5. They've only got 2. And these people are not even really Republicans, and they're not going to be here next year. Liz Cheney is going to get blown out in the primary. She's on her way out. Bye, Liz. Bye. Hurry up. Get her out of there. Adam Kinzinger, same story. He's on his way out. His district is going to be gone. So they're gone. Okay. And what are they going to put? Other Republicans on this committee? So now we're talking about basically a 7-0 committee, right? Fast forward a year from now. So they've got to really cram all this stuff through. Like they are in a time crunch because this is not equitable at all. Of course, you can just do the simple math on it. Here you take a look, your representation, if you're only 2 of 7. So let's presume that those 2 Republicans are actually Republicans. Their share of representation is like a 0.28 ratio, right? Not a lot. Here, if it's a 5 out of 8, you see it's kind of like 2/3 representation almost, right? Almost close to that. 5 out of 8, pretty close. So it's a fraction of representation. I'm talking about, first of all, their own rules they're in violation of, but they're also illegitimate. It's not even remotely fair. It's not even remotely legitimate. So this is what they are basing their power on. It's illegal under their own rule, but they're still doing this anyway. And the DOJ is perfectly okay running forward with these indictments. So they tell us. So to accomplish now this fake committee's purposes and to fulfill its functions, which are illegitimate, House Resolution 503, which reference to the House, says it has the power now to require by subpoena and otherwise the attendance of testimony of witnesses and so on, right? So they skip in the indictment the constitution of the committee. It's not even lawfully created. So, you know, if you're a defense attorney, I think that's the first thing that you're latching onto on these things. We'll see. The select committee issues the subpoena, and he's a private citizen. Now, I think actually Navarro, we're going to hear from him in a minute, but I think he actually filed a lawsuit very recently, like yesterday, which might have caused some of this to happen. I don't know, but I haven't had the chance to take a look at his civil lawsuit. I know he's actually filed a civil lawsuit at some point. So it says from January 2017 until 2021, while Trump was president, Navarro worked at the executive branch as an advisor on various trade and manufacturing policies. This is reading from the government's indictment. They say on February 9th, then, the select committee served Navarro with a subpoena for documents and testimony. Cover letter stated, "Dear Peter, based on publicly available information and information produced to the select committee, we believe that you have documents and information that are relevant to our investigation. For example, you, then a White House trade advisor, reportedly worked with Steve Bannon and others to develop and implement a plan to delay Congress's certification of and ultimately change the outcome of the 2020 election. In your book, you reportedly described this plan as the Green Bay sweep and stated that it was designed as the last best chance to snatch the election. In an interview, you reportedly said that Donald Trump was on board and that more than 100 members of Congress. You also released on your website a 3-page report repeating many of the claims of the election that have been discredited. And of course, because you already discussed these and other relevant issues in your recently published book, in interviews, and among other places on a podcast, we look forward to discussing them with you too." Which is a very sort of cheeky comment, isn't it? Well, you're talking to them about it, so now you're obligated to talk to us about it. Well, you're not a legally constituted body, so he doesn't have the obligation to pay you the courtesy of showing up on your podcast, idiots. Accordingly, the select committee seeks documents and a deposition regarding those and other matters that are within the scope of the select committee's inquiry. They write on in the indictment, as described below, the subpoena, which was in that letter, required Navarro to appear to produce documents on February 23rd and then back for a deposition on March 2nd. The Select Committee subpoena commanded Navarro to appear on February 23rd, 10 a.m. at the U.S. Capitol complex to produce, quote, things identified on the attached schedule touching matters of inquiry to the Select Committee. And we looked at this laundry list, right? This was the same fishing Benny Thompson garbage that he sent out to everybody else. Big, long list of stuff. The schedule attached to the subpoena identified 10 categories of 10 categories of documents that they required him to produce for the January 6th committee. And they also demanded that he appear for a deposition. That was back on March 2nd, so not too long ago. And to not depart or to leave without permission of the Select Committee. They sent another subpoena that included regulations for the use of the deposition. Here's what they said that you're allowed to do in terms of denying, sort of refusing to show up. They say Navarro, or the witness, may refuse to answer a question only to preserve a privilege. When the witness has refused to answer a question to preserve a privilege, members of the staff may proceed with the deposition either at the time or seek a ruling from the chair. If the chair overrules, the witness can be ordered. The deponent who refuses. Okay, so they're basically saying, look, they're trying to take the sting out of the objection that he's privileged. So they know that Peter's defense is going to turn around to say, well, I'm privileged. I got executive privilege and, I don't have to come up and show up and testify. They're going to say, we already carved out an exclusion for this, that you're allowed to show up. You can invoke your privilege, but we've got process for that. If you're sitting here in front of the deposition, in front of our committee, you can lodge that objection, say, I don't want to answer that, say it's a privilege concern, but then we'll get a ruling on it and make a decision on that basis. And he's saying, that's neat. Thank you for your procedure. Don't really care about that. I'm not going to show up and talk anyways. This goes on. Indictment says the subpoena also included instructions for compliance. And basically, he could have complied. The instructions directed that if Navarro could not fully comply with the subpoena by the return date, he should comply, quote, to the extent possible by that date. So if you're not going to give us everything, like if you're not going to give us the full hard drive, at least give us some of the folders to the extent possible so that we know that you're acting in good faith. We know that you're going to start cooperating with us in some way, shape, or form. They say that if Navarro withheld any documents, he should provide a detailed log of which records were withheld and why, and upon completion of the subpoena, written certification that a diligent search had been completed and that all responsive documents had been produced. So your political opponents, when you're trying to sort of capture a country and make sure you never have to face an oppositional party again, if you can't really sideline them, if you can't, prosecute them under the laws of the country, one of the other things that you want to do is really just bog them down with a bunch of paperwork and create a chilling effect on anybody wanting to become part of the country, really, or run part of, to be a part of the party, right? To shut people up, to dissuade them from getting involved in the mix, because as you can see, it can be quite consequential if you are on the wrong end of the equation. He's now a 72-year-old man, lifetime of service, somebody who has been charged with a crime. That's what we're dealing with now. The indictment continues, and they're now detailing why he is in violation of the law. They said this is where our power comes from without really detailing where. And then they say, we gave him all sorts of escape valves. We gave him the opportunity to, if he couldn't comply, go through a proper process, but he still didn't do that. So they fast forward. Now, on February 23rd, 10 a.m., Navarro did not appear before the select committee and produce those documents or that log that we said he should do. He also did not request an extension of time or certify that he conducted that diligent search. In fact, they say, Navarro had not communicated with the select committee in any way after receiving the February 9th subpoena. On February 24th, the select committee wrote to Navarro by email, reminding him that, quote, the subpoena required you to produce documents to the select committee by yesterday, February 23rd, and they're confirming, Peter, we have not received any documents or any indication that you have no documents that are responsive to our schedule. The email that came over from Benny or Liz or one of these idiots reminded Navarro that, quote, the date for your deposition is Wednesday. So they're acting like his sort of assistant now. March 2nd at 10 a.m. We're going to convene in the House office buildings. The select committee asked Navarro to contact the committee at his earliest convenience to discuss the details of the deposition, or let us know if you're not going to show up. Navarro wrote to the select committee on February 27th. In the email, they said, President Trump has invoked executive privilege in this matter. Accordingly, Navarro says, my hands are tied. Well, the select committee didn't like that. They responded by email the same day, rejecting Navarro's stated reason for noncompliance with the committee, directing Navarro to appear for the deposition as required. So they're now like the judge of this thing. They send a subpoena without any due process from an illegally constituted body. He says, I'm not showing up to your stupid committee. Because they're the judge, right? So, ordinarily, like, you go in, you request a subpoena from a judge, and then they approve it. And, you can file a motion to quash the subpoena. And, like, there's process involved in this. But they just said, here's our subpoena that we gave ourselves power to send to you. And he said, no, you did not. I'm not showing up. Thank you. And they said, that's a denial. We're denying your denial. Show up anyways. Because if you don't, we're just going to refer you to an actual court for criminal prosecution. And because they have the DOJ, because Merrick Garland's over there and the Democrats are in control for the time being, they're allowed to do this stuff because the prosecutors have discretion. He's saying, gosh, this really was a dangerous insurrection, and we better do something about this. The Select Committee stated in part, there are topics, including those discussed in the subpoena's letter, that the Select Committee believes it can discuss with you without raising any privilege concerns at all. So now they're taking that equation, that variable out of the equation. In any event, you must appear to assert any executive privilege objections on a question-by-question basis during the depo, right? And you've seen this in other depositions where they'll constantly invoke, right? I invoke my right to remain silent. On advice of counsel, I refuse to answer that question, whatever. The next day, on February 28th, then, Navarro emails back. And he said, listen, hey, that privilege is not mine to waive. And it would be incumbent on the committee to directly negotiate with President Trump and his attorneys regarding any and all things related to this matter. He also copied his 27th February email in there as well. So he attached his prior email. I already answered you, dum-dums. Let me attach it again for you. My hands are tied. He reattached my hands are tied email twice. In an email response, the Select Committee then on March 1st, so, they're sitting there. Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney, we've got crying Adam Kinzinger. He's got boxes of tissues all over the place. We've got multiple people there with Ukrainian sweatshirts on, and they're all sitting around trying to come up with a great response to Peter Navarro. And they're like, oh gosh, these people are pretty clever. He said, my hands are tied, and he's talking about executive privilege. What should we do here? So they issued a response back. They again rejected his stated reason for non-compliance, and they informed Navarro again that he could assert any objections on the record on a question-by-question basis. The Select Committee also confirmed that it planned to proceed on March 2nd with the deposition at the location. They're like, we're going to be there anyways, Peter. And if you're not there, there's going to be consequences. On March 2nd, Navarro didn't show up. He's like, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Do your stupid little thing with Benny Thompson and others. Nobody cares. So this continues on. And now, since he didn't show up, domestic terrorist, allegations are incorporated, and they tell us here and elsewhere that he's been summoned lawfully, according to them, by the authority, which I contest. I don't think they have the authority to do this, of the U.S. House of Representatives to produce papers upon a matter under inquiry before a committee of the House. They did say that he defaulted and the matter's under inquiry. He also refused to produce documents, a communication log of any withheld records, didn't certify his diligent search for the records, and he didn't comply with the subpoena dated on February 9th, issued to show up on February 23rd, and therefore, count 1, contempt of Congress for papers, violation of U.S. Code Section 192. And count 2, dun, 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 the same dang thing, except for the testimony now, saying that he was under inquiry issued by the Select Committee with a subpoena to appear and didn't show up on March 2nd. Therefore, domestic terrorist. And this signed off on by Matthew M. Graves, U.S. Attorney, prosecutor, who is part of the political prosecution, the political inquisition of an opposing party in the United States. And it's going to go the other way at some point. I don't know how long it's going to take for the pendulum to swing the other way, but it's going to swing, and it's going to swing hard, and it's going to be just as disgusting, but you can't really argue against it because we're in that mode now. And both sides are weaponizing basically every single institution in this country against the political opposition. And as that happens, what are we going to see? More and more escalation, as we always do. So this indictment landed in the court and out of D.C., they signed off on it. You got Matthew Graves over here, Merrick Garland. You've got Peter Strzok, who we're going to hear from later, former FBI guy. Of course, he was involved in the Sussman trial. He had a reaction to this. A lot of people are doing cartwheels and high-fiving themselves over this. Very excited that in America, we have political parties prosecuting each other openly in Congress without any lawful or legal basis. Very excited about it. But what they did is they went over to Peter Navarro, they picked him up, and they dragged him back down into court. Who was there listening in on the call line, but none other than our friend Inner City Press, who we spent a lot of time with when we were covering the GM case some months ago. And he was there today. You saw this was taking place right about noon. Tells us the presentment of Peter Navarro is before the judge, Zia Faruqi. And we've talked about him before. Navarro going to be representing himself pro se, which means he doesn't have a lawyer, which is not that good of a thing in these types of situations. You typically want lawyers, right? Even highly accomplished individuals like Peter Navarro, typically well served with a lawyer at these things. And this is when all of those best practices that we talk a lot about here about using your right to remain silent really, really becomes important. And he doesn't do that. But we'll see how consequential that is for him. Let's take a look at how this unfolds as we listen to Inner City Press. Before we do, who is the judge? We got to get our bearings straight. This judge was appointed 2020, went to Georgetown. He was a litigation associate, focused on governmental investigations, 12 years as a federal prosecutor. Oh, great. In St. Louis and Washington, D.C. Prosecuted cases involving cryptocurrency and terrorists, North Korean weapons proliferation, darknet sites. Represented the DOJ at conferences across the globe. A little bit more from him. This is a photograph of the judge, Zia Faruqi, U.S. magistrate judge out of the D.C. circuit, and talks about the law, diversity in the law, almost 3,000 followers. Looks like a nice fellow. So he's there, and he's going to be presiding over this case. And so we know the parties are there, Peter Navarro. We've got the prosecutors there who entered their notices of appearance. We talked about them at the outset of the show. And they arrested Peter now. They haul him in front of court. And the judge is sitting there. And it all starts like this. Mr. Navarro, you're under oath. I'm going to be reading you a copy of the indictment and the charges. And he starts. There is a 2-count indictment that was returned yesterday evening. You've been charged with 2 crimes. 1, contempt of Congress for testimony. The other, for not producing papers. Potential penalties include a term of imprisonment up to 1 year. Prosecutor says the maximum fine is $100,000. And the judge says, $100,000? What are you talking about? I thought it was $1,000. And the prosecutor says, no, judge. It's pretty serious business. Where is there $1,000 fine anywhere in this country? I don't know. Good question. $100,000 sounds a lot more like the federal government. So that's a pretty significant penalty. So the judge is going, whoa, that's pretty serious. That's pretty steep. Okay. So he goes over to Peter. He says, hey, Peter, are you willing, since you're standing here in court, can I appoint counsel for you? Kind of a good idea to have an attorney appointed on your behalf. And Navarro says, well, just for today, judge, just for this, I was prevented from making a phone call. That's a right to counsel violation right there, my friend. That's a humongous problem. Somebody comes to our office where we help good people charged with crimes in the state of Arizona. Free case evaluations available. Scheduled down in the link tree description down below. And there's a right to counsel problem. You might get your case dismissed, okay, if it's a serious one. Like if you go to a DUI case and they don't let you out to call a lawyer or give you a phone to call a lawyer and they're like, no, you just sit there. Good luck. Whew. Whew. Good stuff right there. And so everybody's ears perk up on that. You go, whoa. And the judge did. The judge said, what? I take those allegations seriously. The government has duties to treat everyone fairly. Prevent it from making a phone call. What? Judge says, if you allege that the government has engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, you can file a motion for that, and you probably should and will, but says we can't adjudicate that today, okay? Just because that might have happened doesn't mean that I can hear all of that and settle that today, but file a motion, write that down. Navarro says, I communicated directly with the prosecutor. They let me get to the airport, and they arrested me. They let me get to the airport and then they arrested me? What? What is that all about? Now, this is an interesting thing because typically pretty high profile people like this, even not high profile people like this, at my office Oftentimes, we'll be representing somebody while they're under investigation. No formal charges yet, but we'll communicate to the prosecutor who's in the indictment division, basically in the pre-charging bureau, where they make those decisions, and we say, hey, we're representing this person. I know you're looking into this person. If you do something with this person, can you do us the courtesy of letting us know? Because what I'd like to do is to make sure that we don't decimate this person's life with an unreasonable arrest that is catastrophic for their livelihood. Can we just maybe bring them down to you? And a lot of this gets dealt with behind the scenes. The opposite is when they try to go to Roger Stone's house and sort of smash his head into the back of the FBI van or whatever, right? Here, he's saying, we were talking with prosecutors. They let me go to the airport and they arrested me. So that doesn't seem like a very courteous thing to do. If you are a prosecutor, well, you'd let the defense attorney know, we're going to be arresting your guy. Can you cooperate with us? It's just easier on everybody. It's easier on the government too. You don't have to send agents out to go pick up somebody, and they don't have to get all suited up, and they don't have to get all nervous about this. You can just say, yeah, my guy's going to be cooperative, right? Not even going to be combative. You don't even have to leave the office. We'll come to you, right? It's very common. But they went and picked him up at the airport. Why is that? Now, Peter Strzok and other people out there on the left are like, well, was he trying to flee? Where is he going? Probably Russia. Probably going to go to Russia, wasn't he? Yeah, Alpha Bank, probably going to go there with Paul Manafort. All right. So here, Inner City Press continues on. Now, Navarro went on for apparently about an hour, which is a long time. Okay, most of the time, these initial appearances are like 2 minutes. Here's what you've been charged with. Any release conditions, anything to say? Nope, got a lawyer. I'm not a flight risk, not a danger to the community. You're done. But this kept going. Navarro said, Judge, I want you as the magistrate to see what kind of hardball they're playing here. Judge said, well, look, I'm sure that the district judge Maida will take this very seriously. And this judge is only doing the initial appearance. He's not going to be assigned the case. So oftentimes in criminal law, you'll sort of see like this kind of a round robin situation where you'll have one initial appearance judge. So one judge will kind of take everything that comes in, do the initial appearances or the arraignments or whatever, and then they'll just send them out to the other judges. Okay, Judge Maida, you get one. Judge you get one, and you get one. And they sort of, have a rotation. So he's saying, all of these issues can be dealt with after the fact with the actual assigned judge. Defense lawyer says, all right, Judge, I'm here. Can you appoint me for today only? We'll file a financial affidavit later. And so who is that? Well, it's not Peter Navarro's lawyer because he didn't get the phone call, he says. So this is a public defender who is now there saying, we'll file a financial affidavit later. Right? If you make too much money, you don't get appointed a public defender because you can afford to go hire your own. Or if you do get appointed a public defender, they'll make you contribute a portion of your pay towards the cost of your legal representation. And you do that calculation by filing an affidavit. So presumably Peter Navarro's got plenty of money. He could probably get a lawyer down there, in a heartbeat, but he just doesn't want a lawyer there, I guess. And we have the public defender who's saying, I'll step in just for today. And I've done that many times. I've stepped in, Judge, I'll help this defendant right here. This person has no counsel here. Let me step in. I'll help get them through this one hearing only. And so it's sort of a temporary appointment. And then you get off, then the judge says, okay, I'm not going to carry you over into the next setting. Thanks for your help today. And then you move on, right? And it happens actually fairly commonly. So Navarro says, I don't understand how this is going forward. Once that defense attorney sort of jumps in there, he says, I want to make the case that the arraignment should be postponed for a number of reasons. And the judge says, okay, well, I'm not going to arraign you today. You're going to see Judge Maida on June 17th at noon. Got to mark that date down. June 17th at noon. So we're going to come back for the actual arraignment. So he's just doing sort of an initial appearance to set a couple release conditions. Navarro jumps into a point he's trying to make here. He says, on Tuesday, I filed a civil suit in this building regarding these charges possibly pending against me. Going to have to look into that one too. He says it argues that the subpoena from the congressional committee is ultra virus and unenforceable. It's outside of bounds of the law. It's outside of the scope. They have no legal authority to do that. The same argument we just made. The prosecution, he says, has put me in an untenable position. He continues. Navarro is still going on. He says, Judge, there is a separation of powers issue based on case law. This needs to go to the Supreme Court. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, has colluded with the White House and with Congress, which is true. They've colluded with Joe Biden to strip the immunity of his predecessor. Also true. And I have testimonial immunity. Now, there was a circuit court opinion, an appeals court opinion that said Trump couldn't invoke, I think, retroactive executive immunity if Biden wasn't willing to uphold it. But we haven't spent any time on that opinion here. So he's going to be relying on some of that as his defense. Navarro continues. He says, this was a preemptive strike by the prosecution against my lawsuit. Talk to this judge about it. Tell Judge Mehta, I want it adjourned until my civil suit goes forward. I have to come up with a legal strategy. I don't want to spend my retirement savings on lawyers, which I don't blame him. Who would want to do that? That sounds terrible. Says, I served 4 years in the Trump White House. I save people's lives and jobs. What's coming at me from the DOJ, which doesn't read its own OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel memos, is an attempt to eliminate testimonial immunity. There are bigger things at play than whether I go to prison, says Navarro. It goes on. He says, they moved on me preemptively. I told them who to call. I got up this morning at my apartment. I had to go to Nashville for a TV appearance. He was actually going on the Huckabee show, apparently to communicate about some of the J6 stuff. Says, the agent who arrested me had come to my apartment last week. I said, you can call. Please don't kick down my door. Navarro says, I live like 100 yards from the FBI. But they let me go to the airport and then they slapped handcuffs on me. I was a distinguished public servant for 4 years. No one ever questioned my ethics. That committee is a scam committee that should not subpoena. Also true. He says, maybe we can move the civil suit up on a more expedited timeline, Judge. This is not how America is supposed to function. The behavior of these people is unconscionable. No American should be treated this way. And Judge Faruqi, he's just sitting there. He's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to relay that to Judge Mehta. I'll write all that down. I'll send it on over to him. And the defense lawyer is sitting there going, oh, please stop. Stop talking. Now, we'll see, if any of this is consequential, because I think the strongest argument in these cases is that it is an illegal committee and an illegal subpoena, and he wasn't in violation of any actual criminal law. But we'll see. Here is the continuation of it from Inner City Press on Twitter at Inner City Press. Judge Faruqi says, I think at the next proceeding, Judge Mehta will be inclined to arraign, but you can ask, you can sit down. The government has responded of its discovery responsibilities. And so at the end of these proceedings, the court's going to tell the prosecutors, hey, go out there and make sure you're complying with your disclosure requirements. The defense has now been charged with the crime. You've got all the evidence. They need to start preparing their defense, so start giving them the evidence. Is that clear? Yes, that's clear. Okay. Now you've complied with the disclosure and the orders. Faruqi says, I want to hear from pretrial services. Now, at these types of settings, we have to pause for a minute and ask ourselves, what is the court trying to accomplish? Okay, so let's strip all the politics out of here as best we can for a quick minute, right? Let's take Peter Navarro, Trump, the fake January 6th Select Committee, useless garbage out of this, and just ask ourselves, as regular citizens in what is supposed to be a functional society, we have to ask ourselves, is this person a danger to society? Pretty big question. They've been charged with the crime. Is this type of crime going to be something that might cause somebody to lose something like property or their personal safety or their lives even? Are they a threat to the community? Big conditions are set around stopping that. This person has been charged. Are they going to flee is another question. Are they going to fly off to a different country and never return back? Another very important question. And so at these settings, one of the big conversations is about that. Is this person a flight risk? Are they a danger to themselves and to other people? Are they going to show back up to court, right? Are they going to commit a new crime while they're out on release? Should we keep them in custody instead of releasing them because they are too much of a risk? Should we assign them a pretrial services procedure where they check in with somebody? Should we put them on ankle monitoring? What are all these things meant to do? It's to stop those consequences from happening. Somebody from fleeing, somebody from committing a new crime, and so on and so forth. So here they're having a conversation about this now, talking about how should we release this guy? I mean, he's 72. He's like a domestic terrorist. He knows Donald Trump, which means he's basically like Vladimir. What is a court to do. So the judge says, well, let me hear from pretrial services, which is sort of an entity of probation in many instances that will do their own assessment, and they'll talk about what they think the appropriate remedy is. So we got somebody here named Christine Strzok. She's over at pretrial services. And she chimes in. She says, well, okay, judge, here's what we think. He should call pretrial on Monday and verify his address and also turn into us his passport. So he doesn't flee, you know, because he might be a flight risk if he's a 72-year-old guy who's about to get on an airplane. And so she's saying that should be a condition of his release. If you're going to let him out of your custody, judge, turn in his passport. Also says no narcotics either unless prescribed because he's a drug addict. No firearms, no destructive devices or other weapons. So you sort of give all of that up. You've been charged now. No firearms, no drugs. You can't leave the country. Public defender, his name is Ubong Akpan, says, no, judge. We think these conditions are excessive, obviously. He should only have to report by phone. Navarro says, I concur with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with him. I agree with him, my lawyer. I concur with that. I am no threat to anyone, and I'm not a flight risk. This is just wrong. They arrested me at the jet gate door, which is, you know, it's not really conducive to your flight risk argument. It's like, well, where were you going? You're about to get on a plane. Where was the plane going? I wasn't a flight risk. I was about to get on an airplane. Literally flying. But it was a domestic flight, not going anywhere out of the country, judge. And it was to the Mike Huckabee show. And everybody loves Mike. He's just a nice guy. All right, so it's funny that he chimes in and agrees with his lawyer. All right, so Peter, he continues on and he says, the public defender chimes in, says, Mr. Navarro has every intent of fighting this case. Navarro says, using drugs? Using drugs? That's not me. Is this like a blanket recipe, a one size fits all? I don't think so. Judge Faruqi says, we try to bespoke them. Pretrial says, this is just standard conditions here, Peter. It's just, this is how it works. The defense lawyer's like, this is ridiculous. It's excessive. And Peter's like, I don't even do drugs in the first place. Prosecutor chimes in now and says, the defendant is alleged not to have appeared on a certain date and not to have followed instructions, right? He's sort of already not following procedures that are ordered upon him. So they're saying these conditions are needed. They actually should be harsh. He already got a lawful subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee, which according to these government prosecutors is totally legitimate, perfectly constituted, not illegal at all. And they're saying he violated their orders. And so, Judge, we don't think he's going to agree with your orders either. The firearms restrictions are for the officer's safety so that he doesn't execute them. And Faruqi says, I agree with that. Definitely no guns for him. Definitely not. But narcotics use? Narcotics use? Why are you bringing that up? It says nothing indicates you've used them, Peter. The condition just says don't do it. I mean, I think it's fine to have it on there, right? Like, are you a drug addict? It poses no burden on you, is what he says. Right? Peter's, hopefully like okay with that. I'm sure he is. The travel, he says, I think you don't need to turn in your passport, right? You can keep your passport. Prior notification is okay with me. Just let me know if you're going to leave the country. It goes on. Navarro is now saying to the judge, look, judge, let me just say this to you, okay? Here, I am disappointed in our republic. And judge says, well, that's okay, Mr. Navarro. You have every right to be. Defense lawyer says, we request an exclusion of time under the Speedy Trial Act. Mr. Navarro wants his civil case addressed first. Whoa. And the prosecutor opposes the exclusion. And you can see here that Inner City Press give us an exclamation point here, because that is kind of an interesting thing. So what's going on here is it's a complicated thing about timeliness, right? But we've got the right to have speedy trials in America so that the courts can't just indefinitely postpone your cases, right? If you've ever seen the movie The Count of Monte Cristo, right? They say, well, you've been charged with the crime. and they send him off to the Chateau Reef, and then he stays there for years while he is miserable, but then hones his skills, because they're saying that he's going to be prosecuted eventually, right? So our founders, in their infinite wisdom, put in a provision into our Constitution saying that you have a right to a speedy trial. Okay, now oftentimes defense attorneys will use that to their advantage, and they'll say, look, the government has the burden of proof. They've got to bring the evidence against people, and they've got to do it within the timeliness provisions under the statutes. And if they don't do that, they're in violation of your right to a speedy trial. And there are consequences for that. Oftentimes it's a dismissal of the case. And that means that the government sort of has this clock ticking around their heads. It's like the game of chess, right? It's like you make a move, they click it. You make a move and you click it. And it goes back and forth. The defense team oftentimes will say, I'm not going to waive any of my time. I want it all included, which means every single day that this case takes counts against my total time. So let's say, for example, you're charged with a crime in your jurisdiction. It's a 180-day speedy trial rule. Every one of those days that keeps ticking away, the government loses, right? You lose that. They run out of days, that's it. They're in violation of your right to a speedy trial. Here, though, and in all criminal cases, you can waive that time. So you can say, all right, this case might take 190 days or 210 days or 250 days or sometimes 5 years. And if it's the defense justification for that continuation, you can waive that time. So you can say, I'm not going to count that against the government. And oftentimes the government likes that, right? The rule sort of, it implicates them. It makes them have to work more quickly and produce things more quickly. So they often, anytime the defense says we want a continuance, they're like, yeah, no problem, continuance. No problem, continuance. Unless the cases are getting very old and they're getting scolded by their bosses or whatever, then the judges will come and tell them, oppose any further continuances, and we want this trial to go. They'll also do it in situations like this where it hurts the defendant. So here, Mr. Navarro wants this trial to sort of go out longer. He wants his civil case to resolve before they get to this trial. So he's saying, I'm willing to waive some of my time under the speedy trial provision. But the prosecutor here is saying, we oppose that. We want all of that time back in there because they don't want him to be able to have the civil case leapfrog in front of his criminal case. That's why we get the exclamation point from Inner City Press, because it's like, whoa, they're opposing this? Wow. That's pretty unusual. Navarro says, the intention of the prosecution here is disingenuous, Judge. They don't want my civil suit to move forward. Which it seems true, because they just opposed his request for a continuance and the request to waive the time. I asked them to contact a lawyer several days ago. I'm going to have to find a lawyer, so the clock should be stopped, he says. Judge Faruqi says a civil suit is not enough of a basis on its own to exclude the trial time, but appointment of counsel gives me some concern under the Sixth Amendment, of course, right? Right to counsel and such. So he says the arraignment date is 2 weeks from today. He already has referenced an attorney, Judge, so we don't need to waive that time. Faruqi says, all right, well, I am excluding Speedy Trial Act time. So Peter wins on that one. In 14 days, you will meet Judge Maida. Use the time well. We are adjourned. And so that's the end of the day. And we saw that their next court date, I think, was going to be on, June 17th at noon. And that's when he'll be back there in front of the actual assigned judge. And we'll, of course, continue to cover that. Now, Peter Navarro was out. This was him right after the court proceeding, and he had a lot to say. So I've got a full 5 minutes here, and we'll see how much we can sort of. Well, we'll probably listen to the whole thing, but let's jump into it. This is Peter Navarro today.
Over a 5-year period, Congress has weaponized the investigatory powers of Congress in a way which is unconstitutional. The people of America need to understand Congress has the right to investigate, but only for non-punitive legislative purposes. What that kangaroo committee is doing right now is investigating for punitive purposes. They're essentially acting as judge, jury, and executioner. Their mission, their clear mission, is to prevent Donald John Trump from running for president in 2024 and being elected for president. And people like me are in their way, and they're not coming for me and Trump, they're coming for you. All 74 million of you who voted for Donald John Trump.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. I mean, we're seeing sort of the escalation of this pick up. We are seeing more and more of these subpoenas that are being rejected, referenced over to the DOJ. They're charging more individuals now. They've got their Thursday hearing next week. They're going to be in front of all America to try to shove all of this down our gullets again, because they have tried it enough times now that they're hoping if you continue to tell the story enough that finally people will maybe listen to you, but we'll see what happens. But I think Peter's right. They're trying to use this as a political cudgel to eliminate their enemies and gain favor in the 2022 elections and then, of course, 2024. And the ultimate goal, the big kahuna, is Trump. If they could tie this all to Trump and just get an indictment of him, which is probably coming, that's the big home run that they're looking for. Here is more Peter.
Hang on, I'm not finished. You need
Sorry,
to do your homework. Read that. That case went out, every one of you. I bet there isn't a single person in here who read that whole case. The third issue is that the Constitution is a prohibition against what's called bills of attainders. Okay? This is bills against undue punishment of citizens of this country.
Yeah, Congress passing laws to go target individuals.
Which was inflicted on a man presumed innocent and until proven guilty, demonstrates the utter disregard for the Constitution and the law that the Department of Justice has. I sent them a letter on Wednesday offering a modus vivendi. I told them contact an individual who would discuss this matter. What did they do? They didn't call me. I spoke to the FBI agent who arrested me. I spoke to him Wednesday night. I said, Walter, whatever you need. You don't have to come banging on my door like you did last week getting me out of bed. I'm here to cooperate, okay? What did they do, right? I was on my way to Nashville today to do a TV appearance with Mike Huckabee.
Huckabee.
Right? And instead of coming to my door where I live, which, by the way, is right next to the FBI, instead of calling me and say, hey, we need you down at court, we've got a warrant for you, I would have gladly come. What did they do? They intercepted me getting on the plane. And then they put me in handcuffs. They bring me here. They put me in leg irons. They stick me in a cell. By the way, just historical note, I was in John Hinckley's cell. They seem to think that was like an important historical note. Okay?
All right, so that's what we talked about earlier. The idea being that you don't need to make a big hubbub about the whole thing. They've had multiple conversations about this. Hey, Peter, we're going to come and arrest you. Well, you don't have to come and arrest me. Where's your office? Oh, yeah, the FBI building. It's right around the corner. I'll be there in 2 minutes. But they didn't do that. And so it's sort of, it could be one of two things. It could be one, what they're going to say is that he was getting on an airplane going somewhere and they didn't know what to do about it. And so they sealed this thing. And so they had to go do it. And it was a sense of urgency and right? They're really scared that he may be leaving the country. He was communicating with the FBI agents. That's why it was under seal. That's why they had to do all this stuff. Not so sure about that. I think it's more likely that they wanted to just rub his nose in it because he's a Trump person. Let's go back to him. Now, you can see, right, this is probably how he's talking in court. And you can see sort of how much information he is communicating there. But a lot of this is sort of not really relevant, right? It's sort of after the fact stuff. Let's go back to Peter.
Okay, that's punitive. What they did to me today violated the Constitution. In my lawsuit,
which we want to get,
I discussed going back to Nixon, GSA, and other cases, that what this government is supposed to do when they have an issue such as they've had, and this is not the first rodeo they've had plenty of people question the validity of their subpoenas. What they're supposed to do is take the least burdensome alternative. I told them, go negotiate. with
With
Donald
Trump.
John Trump and his attorneys because I'm in an untenable constitutional position. There's no settled law on this. There's no settled law. And by the way, the law leans squarely towards my right to senior testimonial immunity and President Trump's right to executive privilege. What did they do? They didn't negotiate with the president, as I asked them. That would have been the least burdensome. They didn't file a civil suit like they did with Mears and Bolton back in the Bush administration when they didn't control the justice.
So he's talking about some of the subpoena stuff. I mean, he did reference that, but he's really leaning on the executive privilege and the testimonial privilege. But he did reference the idea that the subpoenas were not valid, but that's sort of not... I'm excited to see what his actual lawsuit says. It sounds like there's some good stuff in there, but I think one of the stronger arguments is going to be that the subpoena power is non-existent because the committee is illegally constituted. Let's see how much more we have.
Department. What did they do? They just came with the full force of the federal government and put the hammer down, trying to intimidate me.
That's true.
Peter,
All right, now hang on.
question, Peter.
One last thing.
Nobody.
One last thing. I have represented myself pro se in this matter because part of the Democrats' strategy is to engage in what is called lawfare.
Yes.
Which is to say to use the legal system for effectively coercion and illicit ends. I do not want to spend several $100,000 on lawyers.
He
But
does
the
not.
reason-
And we're going to get to a post by Scott Adams at the end of the show, who was sharing his book, which is available on Amazon, which I'm sure will support his legal defense fund. And I'm sure he'll have plenty of money to battle back against some of this stuff. But his point remains the same. I was on earlier today listening to a phone call by Mark Elias and the Democracy Docket. It wasn't a phone call. It was a Twitter space. I happened to be listening to it on my phone. But right, he's exactly right. There are lawyers, there are Democrats that are strategizing basically every week. Mark Elias and Democracy Docket, they do it. They're picking up speed now because of the election coming up. But they were talking today about interviewing different organizations, getting more candidates to run, talking about election litigation updates, about funding and where the lawsuits are being filed. And they're planning on this, right? They're using the courts, they're using lawyers, they're using prosecutors, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, all of it as warfare tools in order to effectuate their policies. So he's exactly right about it. I'm hopeful that, he doesn't continue to go pro se because he needs lawyers in a battle like this, right? I understand the reason why you may not want to get a lawyer because you don't want to spend the money on it. You don't want to go through the aggravation. I know many people often feel like they're morally in the right. So getting a lawyer is sort of an admission of defeat to some degree. I'm just going to go in and tell the judge what happened, and they're going to believe me because I'm right. No. Not a good call. It doesn't work like that, especially in this jurisdiction. All right. It's not going to go well for him. So I do hope that he is able to, get counsel like immediately because he's going to need it. And it's an entire entity that he's up against. And let's wrap up with him.
Why I'm here, and this is not about me, folks. Not about me here. This is about a constitutional principle that is important to effective presidential decision making, and what the Justice Department is doing is wrong on all manner of counts. All right, let me stop here. Now, let me warn you here. I'm not going to answer any questions pertaining to the case because with this indictment and arrest,
there you go.
I can't speak specifically about legal matters, so I'm warning you on that, okay?
All right, so he goes on for some additional questions, but you can see his statement there, very frustrated and rightfully so. He just got arrested. He just got his whole stinking day and rest of his year totally evaporated. He now faces the potential of 30 days in jail, prison, $100,000 fines over his head. He doesn't have a lawyer, right? His life is in total disarray because of a political inquisition in this country, in a country that's not supposed to have political inquisitions that use the levers of power of the government, right? It's anathema to everything America stands for to allow this stuff to go on. And it's happening right here. And we have a bunch of SEALs clapping around on camera today over the media over this indictment. Well, let's see what else we have. One of the SEALs clapping is, of course, the former FBI lover, Peter Strzok. You see him here. He was on an interview today. This guy has a podcast on YouTube. And I don't remember the name, not important. It's not even good or interesting. But they were talking today. This is Peter Strzok. And he came out and he was talking a little bit about Michael Sussman. He was talking a little bit about a lot of things going on. Pretty bland, pretty boring, some pretty typical talking points. But he did talk about Peter Navarro, came out today, and says that, you know, he was kind of rambling and mumbling around because he hopped on the call listening to Peter Navarro. And if you go look at Peter Strzok, for those of you who don't know, was one of the guys who was part of the entire FBI Russia collusion hoax. He was right in the thick of it. One of the deputy directors of counterintelligence or some division at the FBI. They're all basically the same, all basically useless. But he was there palling around with James Comey and Andy McCabe and, of course, Michael Sussman and James Baker, and Bill Priestep was his boss, and we talked about him. He was also, I think, having an affair or engaged in an affair with somebody, a married woman, or maybe he was married, something like that, but sending text messages with Lisa Page, right? These are the FBI lovers who were saying, we're going to stop Donald Trump because he's so terrible, right? That's him. And now he's out here talking about this stuff, and he doesn't like Peter Navarro. He's got kind of a bone to pick with him. And so here's what his comments were after the arrest today.
Spent some part of your life today, which you will never get back, listening to Peter Navarro's hearing, which is one very
yuck.
interesting way of saying that we're not allowed to have fun anymore. Tell us about it.
It would, the man, you know, for anybody who's seen him speak before,
we just listened
does not have a lot of discipline over his comments or the place and time of his comments. So
he says that, right, which is sort of true. He did talk a lot in court, but he also said that, you know, this is a kind of a fun comment.
But in the course of his rambling comments, he makes the point that he was arrested, it sounds like either on an airplane or as he was about to get onto an airplane, which he claims he was going to, I think, some speaking event somewhere else in the United States, and that he had also just met with the FBI. It wasn't clear whether he had met with them earlier this week or last week, but in any event, he had had some interaction with the FBI.
He said Wednesday.
Why didn't they just tell me about that then, or arrest me then, or make arrangements there? This is all strong-arm tactics by the government. Presumably because interrupting the peaceful transfer of power in the United States of America is not a strong-arm tactic, and is something that one would be surprised with when faced with
there
handcuffs.
It is.
Anyway, he is...
It's all about January 6th, right? So it's, so he's, Peter Navarro was complaining about handcuffs and strong-arm tactics because overthrowing America and almost taking the podium out of the congressional house is strong arm enough, isn't it, Peter? And so that's Peter Strzok. Somebody in the chat said, yeah, what is he, number 3 at the FBI? That was the number 3? That's the guy? Wow. All right. So we're worse off than we thought we were. And that's absolutely true. That was who was in charge. And they couldn't even convict somebody who lied to them. Shocking. That's our FBI. Totally incompetent. But here was Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz actually was talking about this, and I had no idea, but apparently he's got a show on Rumble, and he actually had a pretty astute explanation of exactly why the fake January 6th Select Committee is so fake. So I wanted to share this with you here, but this is Matt Gaetz now. Now, Matt Gaetz, is an interesting Republican, and I think he's somebody that, we're going to see more Republicans of this variety as both sides begin to arm up, right? The left has pretty much armed up and done their very best to commandeer most of the institutions as they exist throughout this country. But the Republicans have not, but they're starting to, right? I had a short that I released earlier this week talking about the Republicans creating their own GOP army of lawyers and poll watchers. And they're starting to get them trained up like now in preparation for 2024 because they know that they got outworked on the ground in 2020 in many of these jurisdictions. And when poll watchers would be arguing over about somebody's actions, the GOP just got blown out. They got literally cordoned off in the rooms in different locations. And so they're talking about, sort of training their teams for the upcoming election. here, Matt Gaetz is now also, I think, going to be one of those people that is a lot more aggressive, sort of this new breed of Republicans, which I don't necessarily agree is going to lead to good governance or good American policy per se. But I have made the argument that if the Republicans do what the Democrats do, how are you going to argue with that? Because that's the new rules. Like, that's the new game. Look, most gentlemen know, if you engage in a gentlemanly type of combat with another gentleman, there are some moves that are just off limits, right? You don't kick each other in that one location. It's just kind of not fair. It's just kind of a fair, you don't do those things. But if somebody does that or tries to do that to you, now you know that. Now it's fair games. Now there's a whole set of different rules that apply. Any of that gentlemanly friendliness, we're going to leave those manly bits apart, goes out the window because the new ground rules have been established. That's going to happen in America. The Republicans are going to start kicking them in the nads too. And it's going to be well-deserved. And there's not going to be anything that anybody can say about it. You really probably shouldn't kick each other in that area, but they kicked you first, so you better kick them back, and you better do it. Here is Matt Gaetz explaining exactly why this January 6th Select Committee is so useless and garbage.
We also have breaking news right now that I want to go to. Peter Navarro was just indicted by a federal grand jury on criminal contempt of Congress, and this is a total abuse of our justice system. The January 6th committee is illegitimate, and thus no American should be held in contempt of Congress for not complying with a committee that is not duly formed and duly populated. When we had Republicans that Leader McCarthy had selected to serve on the committee, Nancy Pelosi kicked them off. And she did so because she wanted to run an illegitimate process.
Yes.
And you know who was all too willing to run that illegitimate process with Nancy Pelosi? Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger.
Yes.
So it isn't real.
It's not
it isn't
real.
proper. These contempt proceedings are not justified. And it continues to concern us that the goal right now is not for them to be able to deliver for the American people, but for them to be able to just try to scare people about conservatives. Maybe everyone's a domestic extremist. Maybe everyone needs their gun taken away. Maybe everyone's contemptuous. It's quite something.
It is quite something, Matt. And it's something that I would be a little bit more than just concerned about. I mean, I think it's like a huge problem, right? The people on the board are being removed off the board as a result of criminal prosecutions by your opposing political party. It's insane. It's actually insane. But, most Republicans out there like Mitch McConnell and Ted Cruz, what are they doing? They're just sitting there like, well, golly gee shucks, I guess maybe we should go to Cancun again. As long as Donald Trump doesn't run, everything's going to be hunky-dory in our neck of the woods. So, all right, well, we'll see what happens. We've got some reaction from around the interwebs. John Cardillo on Twitter, blue check, says Navarro was arrested on board a plane on his way to do the Huckabee show in Nashville. Says he was going to expose some things about the J6 committee to Huckabee's large audience. But I guess the timing of the arrest and the leg shackles for a process crime are just coincidence. Ooh. We've got a couple more and then we'll jump into your comments. Posobiec, I saw somebody referenced him earlier in the show. Posobiec says, Sussman walks free, who we talked about, and he certainly did. Navarro put in chains. Are you paying attention yet? It's another good comment. Of course, that's true. Two different tiers, two different political systems. One set of justice for the Democrats, another set for the Republicans. We had Scott Adams, I mentioned this earlier, just purchased Peter Navarro's book to support the Peter Navarro defense. It's a good way to do it. And so that's from Scott Adams over on Twitter. And so now I want to hear from you. See what your reaction is from our friends on YouTube and over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And so we'll take a look at some of these super chats. First one came in from Jeff Pearson. Says Dems are waging war on the Constitution. They are the insurrectionists. When do we quit pretending that voting will fix this? It's a really good question, Jeff Pearson, and it's basically the only tool that exists at the moment. I have said for a long time that I don't necessarily know that working within the system is the best way out of the system. I've sort of been hopeful, excited about, optimistic about a different parallel system that evolves simultaneously with our current system. And I really have believed this, and I think it's going to be the future. Let's say we fast forward 10 years. If you can come up with an alternative monetary system where you can just sort of disengage from the US dollar and start operating on a different monetary system, in my personal opinion, it's probably going to be on the back of Bitcoin. This is not financial advice, but creating a tapestry of another economic system upon which you can build another society that just doesn't rely on those old institutions. And as society continues to bifurcate, you're going to see people that just don't want to engage with the federal government anymore. And as the institutions continue to eviscerate themselves by diminishing their power, by using their power, Congress is a lot more powerful if it has legitimacy. The Supreme Court is a lot more powerful if it has legitimacy. Same thing with the presidency. That's why we all care about legitimacy, right? If you study political science, why do nations fail? The people stop thinking those that are governing them are legitimate. Why should we listen to them anymore? Same thing is going to happen in America. The federal government, and that's not the end of America. Okay, the federal government is not America. America is going to be just fine. We'll reconstitute, we'll figure out how to conduct our business without this cancerous leech-like federal government that hangs around all of our necks like an albatross. And so unfortunately, right, things are going to be very messy, I think, until there's enough of a countervailing force that just says, well, we're just not going to come do these things anymore. Subpoena, we're not going to do those things. And we're just going to move to a different physical location where you can't touch us anymore. And the principles of America will live on, and the people who agree with those principles will live on. But the people who want to wreck the rest of those liberties in the name of security or the name of political victories or in the name of pronouns or whatever, they can go figure that out on their own. The rest of the freedom-loving people will reconstitute themselves into an alternative system that is superior. And once you have that equal competition, you'll be able to see it's superior and clearly superior. And I think it'll gain momentum from there. But it does take time, and we're going to see a lot more pain, I think, before we start to see sort of that threshold moment exist where that bifurcation becomes a little bit more evident. But, there was a book out, I think in 1999, I've recommended it a lot here on this channel. It's called The Sovereign Individual. Quite a good book. I think it was highly predictive of sort of the future dynamics of violence and what that means for personal economics and individual sovereignty. In other words, you don't necessarily need the nation state anymore in order to have a functional society. What do we need the federal government for? Largely, right? Other than things like national security, which they've failed at, things like the border, which they failed at, things like economic policy, which they failed at. What benefits do they bring us? Order, peace, calm, peace of mind, competent governance? No, they don't give us any of that stuff. So they just take 40% of our taxes, wreck our businesses, evaporate our money through inflation, kill our sons and daughters in foreign wars, send money across the globe every which way to anybody who wants it. We all get caught with the bill. Give me a break. Like, how does an entity like that survive? It doesn't. People are going to get tired of having their boots on their neck. And once enough people start to feel that way and start to act that way, well, I think things are going to get a lot better. We have another one from Jenny B. Says Navarro really pissed off the Democrats because he said that unless they kill him, he's going to lead the charge to indict Pelosi, Schiff, O'Biden, and many others. They put him in leg irons upon arrest because he's 72. He's probably fast. He's probably might escape. They're sick people. Yeah, they're really sick people. And they're using the Justice Department in order to win. And it's reprehensible. It's reprehensible. These are criminal cases. This is a government that has become way too unwieldy. Jenny B, I think you're right. I saw that in Peter Strzok today. I listened to most of that whole interview. I just played a couple clips here. But Peter was really angry at everything, right? He's sort of gleeful. And if you go to Peter Strzok's Twitter account, he actually posted several different tweets about Navarro because I think he's got a bone to pick with him. He does not like him at all. Brother John's in the house with the super chat. No question there, but thank you, John. I appreciate that support. We had a couple members here, new members, and I started posting a little bit more behind the scenes stuff, kind of some thoughts after the show. I have a couple videos that are for members only, so you get to see those. And I'm going to try to do more of those, kind of walking around, reflecting on my thoughts, sharing my random idea. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, to be honest, but I'm trying to create more members only content. Who knows what it's going to look like, but thank you for becoming members. That was from Thomas Eskridge, and Jenny B became a member. And there's also some good functionality as a member. I think you get some GIF emojis, and you get the little badge to show your support. And it really does go a long way in helping support the show. Gives us a little bit more, resources that we can do some cool stuff with. So thank you for that. Jenny B and Thomas Eskridge. Bear Ashby's back. Bear Ashby gave us the bold prediction, which turned out to be true, about Michael Sussman not guilty. Says, here's another bold statement. Bet they cheat. And Liz doesn't go anywhere. If 20 stupidity is doing the same thing. So he's saying that he's responding to my comments. In other words, I said that Liz Cheney was gone. Gone. Adam Kinzinger, gone. But Bear Ashby's saying, I'm not so sure yet. Those elections haven't happened, and, things could get squirrely. We talked about that new CISA warning about, some of those concerns that they have. It could be very curious. Thank you for that, Bear Ashby. We will wait and see. I do hope that they leave. Liz Cheney has been very annoying. So is Adam Kinzinger. They're not Republicans at all. Just join the Democrats. Here is Hell Warden WOT. Says, if only we had a constitution or something to stop this. That's a great idea, Hell Warden. Somebody should write that in the next iteration of democratic republics. It's a good call. It would be a good idea. If I were doing it, I would probably want to make sure that there was a list of certain rights that are basically natural rights, sort of inalienable God-given rights. I'd want to make sure that they're in there and that they are immutable, that nobody can take those away. Probably like 10 of them or so, just off the top of my head, just throw a list of 10 in there. Self-defense, free speech, right to counsel, due process, all that other stuff. Good idea. We should get together and come up with something. Kareem says, do we still have those monthly Saturday meetups? So Kareem's asking about a watchingthewatchers.locals.com community feature that we used to have, which we used to do monthly meetups. We do not have these anymore, Kareem. We used to do monthly meetups on Zoom, and we did it via Zoom, and it was a fun thing while it lasted, when the show was a little bit smaller and we had a little bit of a smaller community, and we got to kind of meet people and put names to faces and all of that stuff. But as the community has grown a little bit, and as we've had some security concerns, those have had to go away. And I have not been able to figure out a way to sort of bring that back in the same way that we used to do that, which is a bummer, but it is a necessary thing, right? It's sort of a unfortunate thing, but it is necessary. So we used to do these monthly meetups on Zoom, and we stopped doing those for that reason. But Kareem, I do miss them. If you're asking because you miss them, I do miss them too. I really do actually miss them. But maybe, I've been thinking about other formats for this, like call-in, could do a call-in, or could do, spaces. Basically, what the Zoom allowed us to do was a little bit more interaction, but we had our cameras on, so we got to see other things, and that led to some security concerns. And so I'd have to reformulate it and rethink about it, and haven't done that yet. But that's the explanation, Kareem. Another one came in from Pegleg Craig, became a member. Shout out to Pegleg Craig, who became a member. And look who's here. Speaking of meetups, is Geomancy Games, right? And so Geomancy, we saw in some of those meetups, says, if you're tired of politics, which how can you not be, come subscribe and check out my talks about retro video games. Would love the support. Thanks, Rob. Love you, bro. That's over from Geomancy Games, and he is on YouTube. And I would encourage you to go subscribe if you are tired of politics and you like retro games. Which, who doesn't? I watched an interesting video on YouTube Shorts, or maybe it was on TikTok, I can't remember, of somebody who bought old monitors and they got them hyper configured for the retro games. They were like 250, bit or whatever it was, and it looked amazing. One of the best games of all time ever. Is this retro? It's probably retro, right? Is Super Metroid. All right, hands down the best game probably ever. Mark Pate is here with a generous super chat. No question, but thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And there it is on the screen. Mark Pate, I'm going to say. Thank you, Mark. Very generous of you. Brother John with another one. Thank you, Brother John. Jeff Pearson says the FBI declined to represent Strzok and Otten in court. Well documented why and how they ignored ethics and conspired against Trump. Well, Yeah, Strzok had that actual sort of really aggressive interview in front of the Congressional House or maybe it was the Judicial House or the Senate. I don't remember. But remember, he was making all those faces and he was really sort of testifying aggressively. He is not, in my opinion, a pro-America first person, right? He's in the FBI and he was behind a lot of very, very interesting decisions there that involved Michael Sussman and Mark Elias and multiple different layers and white papers and all sorts of stuff. And he sort of has been outside of the blast zone thus far from the Durham investigation and Igor Danchenko and all this stuff. But I sort of get the inkling that he and Andy McCabe are right kind of in the heart of a lot of this, but we'll see. There may be nothing there. We'll have to wait and find out. Norman Smith says, the government has grown parasitic, a 300-pound tick on a 25-pound dog, which is absolutely true. Parasitic, cancerous. It like, you have to, at this moment in our lives, I'm sort of expecting the government to provide more value than it takes from us. Right? If we're going to pay into the system, it should provide more benefits for you. What does the federal government do? What kind of ROI is the average American citizen getting on their dollar? And I'm pretty tired of hearing, well, it's your patriotic duty to give the government money. No, it's not, right? They need to do something productive with it. We don't have an obligation to have our useless leaders dump money down the toilet on a regular basis and keep contributing to it because we're generous, patriotic Americans. I'm tired of that crap. Your fair share, all of that stuff. I'm happy to contribute if it's functional and if it is delivering a return on investment. And even if that just means liberty, ensuring we've got a place to be free and have free speech and we have a safe place to live. That's it. That's all I want most of the time, right? And they're failing on a lot of that. They locked us in our homes. You can't say what you want to say anymore. We're basically being investigated as domestic, homegrown violent extremists every which way you turn from the federal government. So if they're going to be prosecuting their own citizens, what is our obligation to continue to support them? Why? And as soon as there's an alternative that provides a better ROI on your money, people will leave. And I think that that's probably not far off, largely because the government itself is failing. And the Congress people, by investigating their political opponents, are shattering their own power. They're undermining their own legitimacy, which comes back to bite them in the butt. Because the American people, every time we have a cycle of this, they recognize they're illegitimate. Congress is in the tank. Nobody trusts the executive branch anymore. The Supreme Court is not too far behind. And once that happens now, these institutions lose their legitimacy and they start to crumble, which again, may not be that bad of a thing because all they're doing right now is essentially taking while the rest of us are putting. We're all working our butts off out here. We're all trying to save money. We all just got through a pandemic. We're all trying to rebuild our lives. And they are evaporating your money and mine right out from our bank accounts by printing more of it. You see inflation's going through the roof. It's ridiculous. So why do we have to continue to participate in that broken system? There's an alternative. Maybe we look at the alternative. Here we had Share NYB with a very generous dono. Thank you, Share NYB. No question on that one, but a generous super chat. Two of those came in, one from Mark, one from Share. We had Naples Music Live with another one. No question on that, but thank you, Naples Live Music. That sounds nice. Live music in Naples. And Naples Live became a member. So that's also very, very cool. Welcome, Naples. Sledge and Wedge says, are we getting our money's worth from our government? No, the answer is not. What are we getting? A robust supply chain? You don't think that the corporations could figure that out on their own without the government being useless at the ports? Probably not. What environmental protection? Is that what they're doing? Are they creating robust infrastructure, a sound monetary supply, a secure border, strong foreign policy, stopping global instability? No, they're useless at it all. So we're paying for it and they're grifting it off into their bank accounts, both parties. But we, the people, are not getting any good benefits as ROI. It's basically useless. And so those were the supporting comments over on YouTube. I'm jumping over to locals now. Let's do a quick refresh on this comments thread and see if we've got any good Oh, Kenny Cole's here. Says here, we do have some. We got several comments. Kenny Cole's here says, so they perp walked Navarro. They're overplaying their hand. They have zero policy solutions. If this doesn't help MAGA to see what games they have prepared to play, nothing will. The Dems are willing to wield power, then cry if the same tactics are used on them. Ignore the noises coming from their face holes and go after every Dem violating norms, procedure, protocol, and using their aggressive rhetoric. Punish them, he says, peacefully, of course. But this, I think we're talking legally and we're talking poll watching, and it's saying, yeah, play their own games. Right? If they're legal and they're using them, that means the Republicans can use them and be legal as well. Vientikis on Locals says the political prosecution of the people for J6 is the reason against background checks. Those that want to disarm people will use any institution possible, including mental health issues. Without going into details, I'll just say I learned this through my experiences, and I'm still dealing with bureaucracy. Background checks. Yeah, Vientikis Prime having some personal experience with that. And I can understand that, Vientikis. And I think I know what you're talking about. Don't want to speculate on it, but I think I do understand that. JC the Music Man says, we need a mind map. Everything is easier to follow and make sense of with a chart to remind us of the events and the people involved. If you create one and invite me, I can do work on it. Ooh. Well, that sounds like an offer I can't refuse, JC the Music Man. That's Jeremy over on Locals. And I was thinking about that, actually, right? Though what's cool about those mind maps is they are social tools. So you can have other people work on them and contribute. It's a collaborative tool, really. And so I might actually take you up on that, Jeremy. I do think it's worthwhile to create one for the J6 stuff, certainly. The J6, right? Because we're going to have multiple prosecutions on this. And the only real way to organize it all is going to be a mind map, obviously. We've got Steve Bannon's coming up, and so that'll be its own probably full mind map. But Navarro's got one. We may shove both of those into this because they're all sort of one J6 case, but there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think it's a good idea, Jeremy. So thank you for bringing that up. I already have a Bannon mind map, in fact, but let me see what else I've got. So let's just do a quick inventory of the mind maps here. You can see it's opening up. Here is, yeah, I've got definitely Durham. I have got Steve Bannon. I had a Ray Epps one. Here's Steve Bannon. Now, it's not quite ready for prime time, of course, but this is what it looks like, just so we're aware. And I started this for the, you can see the January 6th select committees here, right? We got all the fake committee people here. So we did start assembling this. Maybe we can just kind of peel this off. Maybe we put the House Select Committee here, and then we branch off Steve Bannon, and then we branch off Peter Navarro, and then Mark Meadows, and some of the others. So that's where we're at right now. Vientikis Prime submitted this one over on Locals. Let's see what this one says. Here is Vientikis. He writes, free society, truth is promoted. If it's a fascist society, the truth is censored. In a free society, lies are exposed. In a fascist society, lies are promoted. And I think that's very true. And truth, we are living in a state of censorship. We're living in a state of lies. I mean, the FBI got lied to by Michael Sussman, and the DC jurors said it wasn't even a big deal. Yeah, you're good to go. Don't worry about it. Have a good day. We've got bigger things to worry about. And we had another one from... Who's this from? Former LEO. He says, after the midterms, when the Republican Party has a majority in the Senate, can they replace all of the Democrats and the Republicans and continue the investigation? I'd have to take a look. Well, yeah, I think so, because they'd have to. They've got vacancies to fill, and the majority leader is no longer a Democrat once the balance of power changes. So I think those just flip. They get to appoint the 8 Republicans, and the Democrats get the 5 minority positions if they wanted to follow the House rules that they established themselves. We see here, it says, I would like to hear under oath that the mayor and the chief of police, sergeant at arms, speaker of the House, 14,000 hours of surveillance, and find out what they know of it. And that was from former LEO on Locals. Terry, Matt's mom's here, says... Speechless. I'm just shaking my head over this stuff. I hear you, Matt's mom. It's very frustrating, right, to see this happening in your own country. Chairman of the board says Trump was and still is criticized for the lock her up chant regarding Hillary. What she has been shown to have done by witnesses under oath, Robbie Mook, is far worse than anything Navarro has been shown to do. But he's one lead away. he's the one being led away in shackles, shaking my dang head. What is happening? Yeah, from chairman of the board. Good to see you, chairman. I miss you too, brother. It's always good to connect with you guys, but I agree completely, right? They actually put forward election disinformation on the Russia collusion hoax. No consequences. Not banned from anything. Nobody even cares about it. Vientikis says, to replace the Zoom meets, you could have people make little videos and post them to locals and do once-a-month feedback videos. Well, it's not a bad idea. It's hard to get people to make videos, though. Like, people don't like to make videos of themselves. Yeah, it's a precarious problem, Vientikis. It's like, how do we connect more deeply without getting, Zoom bombed by somebody? But it's a good question, and we're going to continue to play around and experiment with these things. But good to see everybody over on Locals. Jeremy, the Music Man, Vientikis, Kenny Cole's in the house, former LEO, Terry, Matt's mom, chairman of the board, and of course, Vientikis. And I think that's it, my friends. I was taking a look over here on YouTube, and I want to shout out to some of the YouTube chat. I see K Beans over there chatting away. Texas Beast is in the house. RAS Illusion. Geomancy Game says, Rob, I love making videos. It's true, he does. He's got a YouTube channel, so go check him out, Vientikis. And that, my friends, I see DK says, I'm buying Peter's book. Gak Attack says, turn off our cameras when we do Zoom. We could do a Zoom without the cameras, but then it's sort of like a call-in, right? It's sort of like, or a Clubhouse or a Twitter space. So it's like, it's kind of one of those things. Maddie Adams says, good night, Rob. Good night, Maddie. Hope you have a very nice, restful time. Jenny says, hey, Rob, long time no see. Zulu's here. K Bean's in the house. Lean's in the house. Tribunals, please, says JM Liberty Local. Wants tribunals for all of the FBI agents. Should be pretty good. Blue Griffin's here. TJ King is here. Talbert's mom. And RAS Illusion says, be well. And Glory Day says, nobody cares about Lean, but I care about you, Lean. I care about you deeply. I'm glad that you're here. And I'm glad that you're a part of our YouTube chat and our community. But that, my friends, is it for us. I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. We'll continue to cover Peter Navarro. We'll continue to cover Steve Bannon. All of these fake January 6 select loser cases that they're moving forward. And I hope you continue to join us on that journey. But that is it for me for the day. I want to thank all of the new members who joined us on YouTube. Very awesome. Thank you for all the very generous super chats. Thanks for joining us over on Locals. Thanks for referring my law firm. Thanks for thinking about us out there. If you know anybody who is charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, we love to help people. We've got a great team and we offer free case evaluations. All of the description, all of the information is down in the link in the description below. That's so hard for me to say. But we do appreciate it, and it means we get to spend more time together here. So thank you for supporting the R&R Law Group. And that is it for us, my friends. It's Friday. I'll probably have some additional stuff coming out tomorrow and Sunday. We'll see. But I really appreciate you being here tonight. It is the weekend. Always a good idea to unplug from politics a little bit, get some fresh air, spend time with friends or family, recharge those batteries, because, boy, we're going to be here again all next week to hit it hard. Make sure that we hold these people accountable. But that's it for me, everybody. Have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.